Many small children are suffering. They are in need. Nobody is helping. And if not us older ones, who then will? So cruel things are happening, especially also in children's homes. So many tests are also carried out on children. Olaf Scholz already said back in 2002, we want the supremacy over the cribs for a reason. That was the goal, and they have achieved that, because families from whom children have been taken away are practically at the mercy of the state. This means that it is now also a weapon of the system to act against critics of the system, either by threatening them or actually taking away their children. Exactly, that's the way it is, yes. Child abuse, child trafficking, arbitrary child removal. The perpetrators are among us. The next victim could be from our own family, and yet we do not speak about it. The disgust is too great, the fear is too great. So many who raise their voices against these atrocities had to pay for it. They were threatened, beaten, locked up, or even murdered. Because when you stand up for children, you are challenging the most powerful. And yet, there are impressive people who defy all of this, who bravely stand against the apparent superiority to fight for our children. One of them is the forensic psychologist and court-appointed expert Dr. Andrea Christidis. With her, I will speak today at Elsa auf 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and be warned. This conversation is now not something for weak nerves. Dr. Christidis, welcome to our studio. Thank you for having me. You write, my intention is to bring the taboo subject of sexual violence against children, child trafficking and any other form of exploitation of children out of the dark silence corner. Some before you, you have already tried that, as mentioned earlier, and suffered bitterly for it, and they were silenced in various ways. Why aren't you afraid? Well, on the one hand, it is true that fear is not a good advisor, and if you're afraid, you're incapable of acting. I'm now 66 years old, or will turn 67 this year, and many children are suffering. They're in need, no one is helping, and if not us older people, who then will? And I experience parents who are very helpless, paralyzed and scared that maybe their other children will also be taken from them, or if they still have any at home, or someone harms their parents or something similar, and then they do not do anything, and somebody has to do something about it. Why are the opponents so powerful, and with whom are we dealing here? We are dealing with government agencies on the one hand. I would like to explain it briefly. The Youth Welfare Committee consists of politicians and paying authorities that work together at the same time. Funds are annually allocated in the Budget Committee for children's home placements, as mentioned in the supervised facilities, but also for foster care placements. Then there are framework agreements with these paying authorities, and these places then have to be filled somehow. That's one point. If the funds are not used up, the taxpayer naturally asks, why did you spend so much money, budgeted so much? And then there weren't that many children at home, so there's also a certain pressure behind it, on the one hand. On the other, one children's home after another is being established. The pressure of society through the media, which keep saying, look, little Dennis was found in the refrigerator, and there's another child who died in Hamburg because foster parents left a substitute for drugs accessible, and the child drank it. It should be tested once because their own parents were heroin dependent, and then the idea was for the child to go to foster parents who lived in the same environment, but who were in the methadone program. The idea was to test whether this works. So many tests are also carried out with children. That's one point of the powerful. But we also have completely different things that are long known, such as the studies of Professor Dr. Helmut Kendler, who for over 30 years placed street children with the help of youth welfare officers across Germany, not only one youth welfare office, with convicted pedo criminals in high positions. This does not come from me. This is what the Hildesheim study says, that you can download from the net on Google. You can simply open it and read it. That means dignitaries use children. The same happened with children who were evidently sold by this NSU trio. The matter was not pursued any further. On Arte Zschäpe's laptop, there were incredibly many child pornography files, and nothing was done. These are definitely people who could be considered as witnesses, and 7 of these people have died. It was not just about right-wing extremism or bank robberies, it was also about child trafficking in this case. And the political scientist, I think he is a political scientist, Hajo Funke, is quite well known, said along the lines, I can't quite remember the sentence, in an interview he said, he advised the NSU investigative committee, children were introduced by this NSU trio to gentlemen in high positions. It's always the same. It's always about people in high positions who will not be further prosecuted. If you have a normal guy, let's say a worker or someone, yes, let's say a team coach or something like it, who doesn't have a say, he will be put on the pillory, but all in high positions are spared. That's unfortunately a point, and that's also known from the Epstein files. That is known about Dutroux. In the Dutroux case, 27 Crown witnesses have died. I now heard that this number has supposedly risen to 30 now. I've also read this. It is incredible. This is not further investigated, not pursued. And it's not being further investigated. Yes, probably because the most powerful people are behind it. It must be an incredibly large network of perpetrators, profiteers, people who protect and cover up the perpetrators, defend them. So one can only guess how big it is. Yes, that goes up to the highest echelons, and the perpetrators are being protected. The files of the NSU Investigation Committee have been closed for many, many years, not accessible to the public. The Epstein files, where the list is supposed to be published at least now by Trump, he promised. By the way, I have it, and it is not blackened. I actually got it from an investigative journalist who was kind enough to forward it to me. But it is also clear that back then Hillary Clinton in Haiti had children kidnapped by a lady who was then also in prison after a natural disaster. And she has... These emails do exist. I have them too. When you want them, she has exchanged emails with this kidnapper and has negotiated with her about the transportation costs of the children, who she would like to have in her children's homes. She has a foundation with children's homes in Hillary Clinton, and she wanted to have them taken there. And this was made public by Julian Assange, so that you can assume that not only the publication of war crimes by the Americans played a role, but also the publication of Pizzagate, if you so will. That was also part of it. Many would describe this as a hopeless situation now, that the most powerful are really involved and the witnesses often die, just as you have now described it yourself. Why do you still have hope there? I do not have hope at all, but I can't stop either. So, I mean, let's say those who don't try to fight have already lost. And it's about children here. It's about helpless individuals. And if no one takes care of it, it's already bad enough, I have to say, that children, not only in Germany, but also in other countries, simply do not have a lobby. And I find that really terrible. I have 3 adult children and 7 grandchildren myself, and of course I feel called to do something about it, yes. Keyword hope. Many now have hope through the revelations made by Elon Musk about Great Britain. Many believe that this will now open up a lot and globally make some things come to light. How do you assess this? It's very difficult to judge that. So what initially annoyed me, allow me to say this, now we have this super rich man here who is in charge of the publication, and these had been done by others before. For example, Sabine Goye-McNeill has already pointed out many years ago that children, for example, in Hampstead, were subjected to an incredible, terrible sexual abuse, ritual abuse and satanic abuse. She mentioned names, published them, and spent in prison for it for 4 years. She was then deported to Germany. I've just spoken to her a few days ago. Now comes a super rich billionaire who says the same, and everyone has hope, and no one says anything against it. That's exactly what I mean. Does anyone have the status to make this public? He is believed. One listens. One does not even really dare to say anything against it because the thing is true. It's the way he says. And if normal people uncover this, they end up in jail. That's the way it is. I can say that because this is not an isolated case. Also in Germany, the pediatrician Dr. Dorothea Duhl treated children from a closed children's home. The children have talked about sexual abuse by judges and prosecutors. She filed a complaint with the police. She recorded this complaint because she was afraid it wouldn't be processed. This record somehow ended up somewhere. Then her recording ended up on the internet. She didn't know at all how it happened, how this could have happened. She has absolutely no idea about Telegram channels. There were 2 people who set up her Telegram channels, and because she can't do it. She is in the generation I'm also in. I couldn't have done it myself either, to be honest. And this woman was beaten up in front of her own front door initially. Then she did not stop. She continued to report about it, however, without revealing any names. I've also watched the videos. I didn't hear any names. And then she was in pre-trial detention for 1.5 years. Was released about 3 or 4 months ago. The court hearing has been over for about 2 weeks or so. There's a verdict, a sentence that she should receive 2.5 year prison sentence. She served 1.5 years. And the fatal thing about the story is the Telegram owner, proprietor Pavel Durov, has offered to cooperate with the judiciary and the prosecutors, and when requests come in asking who operates the channel, who is installed it, to make this known. However, he was not asked, but an expert was consulted who said, no, this was definitely, absolutely not AI. This was definitely done by Mrs. Tool and so on. Now we know through Fernuni Hagen University, which already conducted a study in 2016 on court-appointed experts, and found out after a benevolent examination, they write this themselves in their study, that at least 50% of the expert opinions were not usable. Professor Dr. Ursula Kresser of LMU Munich conducted almost at the same time a similar study asking experts whether they agreed with the trend that the way expert opinions were to look like was predetermined by the judge, and about 50% that this was exactly the case. This means instead of having a clear, verifiable investigation, meaning that Pavel Durov was interviewed, an expert is recruited who is just so easily influenceable because they want to earn money. Of course, I can't accuse them of this, that's clear. But it is very dubious to me to proceed like this. So she has uncovered some networks that involve judges and the like. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Freemasons and church members and so on. Yes. She has uncovered a whole lot, has also talked about it. She has talked about it again. That's why they naturally want to have her out of the way. Exactly. That's the point. But we want to jump back to Great Britain now. That was basically where we were. Or here also establish this connection. You said a few things about Germany. It's believed, due to what pops up in Great Britain in terms of pedocriminal networks, and so on, that there's a certain hotspot there. But as you're portraying it now, it's not much different in Germany, or probably also in Austria. It's in Austria, in Switzerland, it's in Holland, no matter where. It is everywhere. Yes. These networks exist everywhere. In France, for example, there was Brunel, who, along with Epstein, Brunel had promoted this. I don't remember this brand now, what it was called. Yeah, oh well, yes, well, Victoria's Secret. I don't know how to put it, but they promoted this brand, and then they had underage girls, young girls, come that they was supposed to apply. They were taken pictures of. The girls were happy, they're now models, and then they were simply handed over to wealthy men. This is how I would like to say it. So it's everywhere around the whole world. Mainly, I unfortunately have to say, in the West. I also know that there are baby brothels in Turkey. I know that it exists there too. There's simply no respect for children. And unfortunately, fact is that in many Arab countries, girls can already be married at the age of 9. This is simply considered normal. That is terrible. Is this probably also the reason why it seems that there is more happening in the West? Or does it have to be more covered up in the West because it's simply not socially accepted? Yes, that's exactly how I see it. Because there is so much is irresponsibility at all that leaves me speechless, because children should be protected. Children have, I would say, at least until the age of 18, I would rather say until the age of 21, they don't have a fully matured brain at all, and the hormone development and so on. This is all not finished yet. And to interfere so profoundly with the life of the child is a crime for me. This even happens through youth welfare offices. There is this so-called experiential education, and people say, yes, some children are so difficult, we're now taking them to Spain, to Greece, already to Siberia. In the district of Gießen, a boy was taken to Siberia because he was just difficult. Often you hear nothing from them for years. Some come back and some don't. The children and teenagers are often, I've conducted interviews and I can really prove it, I've spoken with children, they're sold on plantations as cheap labor. They are assigned to all kinds of tasks in the food service sector at different working hours, in shift work, and they're often, very often abused by their own carers, but they also abuse each other. That is really terrible what is happening there. But we also know about the SOS children's villages worldwide. There's also the study. I have the study, and I'm happy to submit it to the investigation commission. I can also provide those if you like. At least 160 children were sexually abused in SOS children's villages by super rich donors, those who have donated for it. It's always the same. Some of these children, these girls, became pregnant at the age of 12, 13 years. They simply performed an abortion, and neither the parents know. There was no consent at all. It was simply done. So cruel things are happening, especially also in children's homes. Time to wake up with our carefully selected books of Auf Eins shop. Get the decisive knowledge advantage. 500 books in the areas of politics and history, COVID, health, crisis preparedness, finances, and much more. Books that the system would prefer to keep hidden from you. Get captivating reading material. Every purchase also supports the work of Auf Eins. Being informed early is crucial. Education can save lives. This is only possible with your donation. Together against uniformity and propaganda, we broadcast, you donate. But how should one imagine the disappearance of children, even if one thinks now of oneself? Are they lured from the street or kidnapped there? Or how can I imagine this? What's happening? Well, so for one thing, when children enter puberty, and I start talking about the children from the age of 12 first, and you have to differentiate there. There are many children who want to break free from their parental home, become defined, as is the case then in adolescence or before adolescence. They then become sullen and stop, and so the child welfare officers often go to schools as well as pro familia. They actually do these sex education lessons. So now if you have trouble with your parents, come to us. And then if they're not allowed to do something, they get angry and think, now I'll give it back to my mother, my father. They contact the youth welfare office, whoosh, they're accommodated somewhere according to their own requests, they say, and they cannot foresee these consequences at all. That's one point. And then it just takes one anonymous call from a neighbor or something like it, and they say, yes, there's constantly a child screaming, you have to check that out, and then the children are simply removed. I'm currently working on such a case at the moment. I'm just saying 8 children were removed from the family, and I really can't find any real reason. So there's always some little thing to criticize. But if you want to remove a child for every little thing, then we can only just raise the children socially, and then we don't need any parents anymore. Okay, then let's continue talking about child custody or removal. You take care of, as you already mentioned, many cases have already been examined as a court expert in over 1,000 instances and found that only a single-digit percentage was truly justified in those cases where the children were removed. And you even go one step further, saying that there's a system to it. It's about power and money, and often about pedocriminal networks. Can you explain this further? It's incredibly difficult to fend oneself against youth welfare officers. The youth welfare officers simply claim a danger to the child's well-being, saying the child is neglected, the parents are overwhelmed. Now please explain what overwhelmed is. I can be overwhelmed if, for example, one of my parents has died, when a child is seriously ill, when I'm going through a separation from a husband or partner, or I've lost my job, then I'm overtaxed for a while. That happens, or an illness. To then remove the children because there's this temporary overtaxation, and the worst thing is actually that most parents who had their children removed tell me they sought help from the youth welfare office. They said they needed some support, they weren't putting up with it at the moment because this was the issue before. Yes, they had problems before, and they thought they get help, and then the horror started. Exactly, that was the case many times. And then there's usually social pedagogical family support service providers who come to the family, and what they do by and large, not always, but most of them, they write down what the parents do right and what they do wrong, mainly what they do wrong. When you read these reports, and I have read many, they look like Stasi reports by these IMs. So that really shocked me. This is about spying on families. Nothing else. Total control, basically. But also during the COVID period, when parents did not want their children to wear masks for so many hours or get those swabs inserted into their noses by non-professional staff who were not properly informed about these swabs, then this was already a problem. Then school said that this child should no longer attend school. They didn't let them in without a mask. That was what it was like, and without the test. And then they said the child is not going to school. And that's why the youth welfare office has to intervene now. So insidious. Everything is just always turned upside down. And the problem is we have with a paragraph 8a of the Social Code 8, this is the protective mandate of the youth welfare officers, we have something that was always considered unprofessional, and that is a reversal of the burden of proof. This means not the Youth Welfare Office has to prove that there is a risk to the well-being of the children, but the parents must prove that this risk is not present. And now try to prove to someone that you're not an elephant. During COVID, there were especially many families affected by child removal? Yes, there were incredibly many families affected. There were a lot. I know that there is a whole group of parents in Berlin, also elsewhere, but Parents Association formed with the name Parents Stand Up. They are cooperation partners of Action Resist. I founded that in February last year. A long story I don't want to tell what happened there, but parents who stand up for themselves are being attacked. One must see it that way. A lot has already come to light about COVID, or much has been found out, that the mainstream and politics were wrong, and yet many there have not gotten their children back, or have they? Or what is the situation now? Yes, many did not get their children back, exactly. And in one case, I don't want to tell individual cases now, but just as an example, I have a woman in the far north who had 3 children removed because children were said to be lonely. She was not sending them to school anymore. They had no social contacts. They said this was during COVID. Now it's all over. Now people simply say, yes, she was to blame herself. She does not recognize the Federal Republic. They said she was a Reichsbürger. This is done very, very often with parents. I had another mother who had 6 children removed, single parent. She was also accused by the Youth Welfare Office in the same way. Fortunately, the children were returned, but it was a tough battle. So this means that it is now also a weapon used of the system, either by threatening them or actually taking their children away. Exactly, that's right. So you experience this more constantly. I know of a case in which even the lawyers of the state of Hesse wrote that a father didn't have to wonder that he was not getting his children back, considered his attitude, his mindset, completely openly. It is often like this in relationship disputes or marital disputes, that if one partner has the wrong mindset, that he or she has already lost anyway in front of the Youth Welfare Office or in front of court, right? Yes, that's exactly right. Who is a critic has a problem, generally. This is evident with Rainer Füllmich. You can also see it with doctors. This sounds terrible now, the way I say it. I'm not blaming anyone, but I was so grateful when suddenly the doctors went up on the barricade. So, for example, MWGFD, and said, can't be acceptable, these vaccinations. They're not tested sufficiently. The thing with the mask, this is harmful to the children, also for adults, of course. And then we had Professor Bhakti, who was suddenly charged with incitement to hatred, or Ronny Weigel, charged with having issued false mask certificates, etc. Since then, all this madness, sorry for calling it like that, suddenly got a face, because doctors have a different lobby than children. Suddenly one also looks a bit more at the children, because one notices something is not right in this country. So this is just one aspect of it, saying critics of the system are being threatened with or really having their children removed from them. And the other thing is what you mentioned earlier, that this is systematic, and that it's about power and money, because somehow one wants to reach the children of families. Please explain this in more detail. I would like to come back to it. On the one hand, parents are responsible for paying for the accommodation of their children they do not want. They are seized until the seizure exemption threshold. I've had many parents who lost their cars because of this, lost pretty much everything. Then the children are often taken to facilities hundreds of kilometers away, so that the parents often cannot even visit their children anymore, until they then lose their job and somehow turn to charitable organizations so that they get paid for the costs to be able to visit their children at all. That's the one point. So the parents are completely ruined. And if they're still rebellious, then they're simply psychiatrized. You wouldn't believe how many expert opinions I do. I often review expert opinions. I also write some expert opinions on requests from parents myself. And I have experienced so often that experts who do not even have the training for it have issued psychiatric diagnosis that sometimes rarely occur at all, such as Münchhausen by proxy or delusional disorder or schizophrenia. So the most amazing things that suddenly appear there without even having done the necessary testing procedures, having run multimodal examinations, or without having the skills for it at all. And then the children are gone. And then I often come into play, and it's so much now that I can no longer cope with it on my own. It has simply gotten out of hand. The child removals and the incorrect expert opinions. This is a market. I've already shown it in other interviews. There are invoices from experts in front of me. They range from 6,000 to 35,000 euros for one expert opinion. And this is usually paid for by the parents. Unless they receive transfer payments, then the taxpayer pays for it. The taxpayer doesn't even know what he has to pay for procedural advocates, for the placement of children, and accommodating children costs between 4,000 and 12,000 euros per month. So it's an incredible amount of money that is being turned over here. This is a dispute management. This is a proper market. But as you describe it now, it can really happen to anyone, that their children are removed, or that the Youth Welfare Office rings on the doorbell. Yes, of course. Or are there any similarities between the cases? This is more poorer people? No, really everything, from academics to regular workers, where, strangely enough, at least in my environment, they never go. This is groups like Hells Angels or real criminals. They don't go there. For example, we have a, let's call it settlement in our village, where it really gets hot, where there are a lot of criminals, many fist fights, where children sometimes look really terrible. I once had an educational institute there. Nobody goes in anymore. Everyone is scared. So the truly better children are not being helped at all. So another very important point is that for about 3 or 4 years now, fact is that when mothers suspect that their child is being sexually abused by the partner, be it the own father, the stepfather, or something like it, and then contact the Child Protection Association, request an examination, you can assume that it won't take long before they have their child removed and handed over to the suspected perpetrator. The point is, sexual abuse is, if there are no clear injuries and no genetic material is found, basically not detectable. And this suffices to say, if it's not detectable, that the mother made it up. The mother manipulated the child, and therefore the child is removed. This is so horrible, what I'm experiencing here. It's really bad. But how can one explain this? Why is then given to the father? I mean, if there's a suspicion, or let's put it that way, is it a crime that the mother may have invented this now? If it's not true, but to accept then the risk that a real crime might happen, that's difficult to explain. Yes, that is difficult to explain. But against the background that we now know that cuddle corners are created in kindergartens, that children should touch each other sexually, that the WHO writes children should learn from a young age what an orgasm is, how to feel good when you touch yourself. We know that many male carers, but also partially female caregivers in kindergartens, have abused the children. We know from the gentleman of original play who came to the kindergartens and allegedly trained the original playing, like children playing, wanted to teach pedagogically that there has been sexual abuse and that the parents didn't even know that foreign men, alien men, came to the kindergarten and violated their children. We know that children recently, without their parents knowing, receive sex education by pro familia, for example, being educated about anal sex, about oral sex, about all possible perverse things. I don't want to listen to all of them. And we also had the case once that a family came to me because one of these sex therapists of Pro Familia returned to the school a few days later and just wanted to speak with one of the boys alone because he had a suspicion. The teachers actually left him alone with the boy in a room. The sex educator or sex therapist harassed the child to such an extent that it ran away. The parents then came to me with the children and asked me to write an expert opinion. It's really unbelievable what's currently happening at schools. That means in kindergartens and schools, children are not safe. Children are not safe in children's homes or orphanages. We know of the Elena who lost her life in the Wunsbüttel children's home and was sexually abused there. We know it from SOS Children Villages, we know it from so many, and yet children continue to be removed. We know that at least 50% of all expert opinions are useless. The judges accept the expert opinions again, despite knowing they're useless, always have expert opinions written to protect themselves. And this causes incredible harm to children, and it is an economic market. The way you are describing it right now sounds as if it started with mothers who work against mistakes, who may be suspected of abusing children. Then you talked about schools, but always and in many cases the perpetrators are defended. That sounds like they would either all stick together or were connected in networks, or how am I to imagine this? Or one covers the other because they understand among friends, so to speak, or because they share the same problem, psychological problem, or the same inclination. How is it possible that this is the case? It seems like an epidemic almost, or pandemic actually, that is spreading all over the world. When you listen to that, it seems like this, as if there were really masses there with such inclinations. Well, at gentlemen's get-togethers and in sports clubs and so on, they brag about the young one he got and how cool and great he is. This strengthens their self-esteem. I'm not talking about young children now. I'm not now referring to girls from the age of 13. And then there are the openly professed pedophiles. They call themselves, for example, Boy Wiki. You can look it up under Boy Wiki. And then there's the Krumme 13, the Crooked 13. They are large associations of pedocriminals, often even convicted perpetrators who admit that they are pedocriminals. They never actually refer to them as this, but they call themselves boy lovers. This website exists. Dieter Gieseking is a well-known name, a previously convicted pedocriminal who now has also written to me multiple times. I've not managed to reply to him and to reply to the things he proclaims there. These men truly believe they are only doing good for the children because they buy them great gifts after all. And they help them, they support them in their development, in school, they accompany them well into life because they love them just like parents love their children. Just that healthy parents usually do not climb into bed with their children. But that's how they see themselves, as love that is just normal love, and they want this to be legalized. That's what it's like on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a law that even children from the age of 14 are only limited legally competent. And at the same time, sex with a 14-year-old should no longer be punishable. Something is not right in our system. I also have some articles about that. Police reported when sexual abuse was detected in certain circles, it was said that they were hindered in their investigations. This is what the police officer said. Also in the case of Edati back then, who chaired the NSU investigative committee, he had posing pictures on his laptop. At the same time, the chief BKA investigator in the field of child pornography was exposed having watched child pornography images. He was, as the newspaper wrote, gently disposed of. It was not to come out. That's it. So those who are in high positions, they are protected. Nobody's to find out, and others will be put on the pillory so that the population sees there's something being done about it. Time to wake up with our carefully selected books from the Auf 1 shop. You get the cutting-edge in knowledge. 500 books in the area of politics and history, COVID, health, crisis preparedness, finance, and lots more. Books that the system would prefer to keep hidden from you. Get thrilling reading material. Every purchase also supports the work of Auf 1. Being informed early is crucial. Education can save lives. This is only possible with your donation. Together against forced conformity and propaganda, we broadcast, you donate. Yes, but only to a very small extent, so no one or only very few have an idea how big the extent is. I also have to say, I've also talked to some people about this in the run-up to the show, and I've just indicated that also with the removal of children and how extreme this is and how dangerous it is for critics of the system. And I also referred to the multitude of pedocriminals who dwell among us. And if I tell other people about this now, then I often get, well, they don't believe me. So they tell me, yeah, why do we hear so little about it then? Then there must be thousands, millions of parents who should go to the barricades, especially in social media. It would have been really extreme then that the burden of proof pops up. Why is this not the case? In the social media, it is already present, but not in the so-called leading mainstream media. In the social media, it's already very present. There are all of these parent associations, for example, Eltern stehen auf, there's Father's Revolution for Children, there's the Mother's Lobby. Many associations do exist, but they just don't receive any attention. And it's true. It's not without danger. For example, I appear in front of a criminal court every year for 15 years, because of what I do. I have fantastic attacks. I just went through a court hearing again on Friday, and I'll have another one on Friday. We didn't finish, so we're continuing now. This is happening every year. Public prosecution does everything to silence me because... And that was the main point in this one case from the very beginning, because I was able to prove that a mother's signature in the youth welfare office of the Gießen district was forged, and that she had her children removed for that reason. A 3-month-old baby and 3-year-old son. She has not gotten them back. And the family, they are Italians, I was told. I grew up in the place where the children were housed. School colleagues told me that they are part of the mafia and post photos on Facebook of themselves with the children cheek to cheek, and then they show little hearts, and yes, they include them in the photos. So pretty intense. And the little boy, when he started school at 6 years, he was so behaviorally conspicuous that he hid under the school desk anxiously. He had total panic attacks and used the most vulgar swear words that did not correspond to his age. I don't want to mention them here. really very bad and was simultaneously panicked. And this is absolutely clear to me. In my opinion, this is a case of pedocriminality. These children were sold, to my mind. So the foster parents are in the mafia, right? Yeah, this is what I was told. I can't prove it, but I know that every year, and I can prove that because I've seen the file, that every year they drive to, what's the name of the place in Italy where Drangheta is? I can't remember the name, sorry. In any case, there is the Drangheta that is a well-known, Calabria, yeah. They go on vacation several times a year there, and the children, yes, at least the boy. I never heard of the girl again. I know from the boy that he's completely behaviorally conspicuous, was not all suitable for proper schooling, and was already administered psychotropic drugs at the age of 7 to be able to function somewhat normally. You just talked about a 3-month-old baby being taken away from the mother. This is not an isolated case, and Dr. Magister Josef Meitz, who handles many cases like you, he also writes on his website that babies are in especially high demand, that there's also money being paid for them, and that it is not uncommon for the babies to be truly ripped away from their mother's breast as newborns. So you can also describe this. What happens then to the babies? Why are babies so in demand? That sounds really disgusting. Well, babies are, it really depends on where the children are sent. So if the babies come to parents who do not have children, maybe the woman is dying to have a child, that's possible. But it's of course unacceptable that this child is therefore abducted from its mother to this end. She just pays a large sum, and yeah, this is the case with adoptions. And I know of many cases where the babies go directly to foster parents from the delivery room. Directly from the delivery room. And this is awful. These mothers, they are completely shattered. They can't handle it anymore because they had been anticipating their baby, and many go to hospitals far away, or they give birth with midwives now because they are afraid that someone might take their children, because Child Protective Services had already been visiting them during pregnancy. So what parents are coming up now, or they escape to France or Poland, because Poland is currently granting asylum to parents in Germany. Poland grants asylum to parents who still have custody or have just given birth to the mothers, and then they're relatively protected when they stay there. I have several cases there, and if both parents are in Poland, and not just one parent, then they are allowed to stay there. However, if a mother or a father takes the child to Poland, the other parent stays in Germany and looks for the child, then of course they don't stand a chance, because both parents naturally have a right to their children, and the child, of course, has the right to both parents as well. Well, it is generally the case, or is this what you perceive, that the demand for babies is rising so enormously? On the one hand, for many, many years, it has been uncovered that there are baby factories in Nigeria where women are actually held captive to give birth until the babies are born, babies that are then shipped to the West and sold. That's one thing. And the other thing is just that there's also a rising number of babies removed from their mothers. Why is this high demand for babies? Is it a rising figure, or is it just our perception? Both. Both is true. It is perceived more, finally, at last, but the demand is also increasing. Oh, we don't even have to go as far as Nigeria. The same happens in Ukraine. All the surrogate mothers who leave their babies there. And partly, people who've paid the surrogate mother do not even know whether this child is from the surrogate mother or another one, because they confuse them. In the meantime, the same surface in Greece. I'm very often in Greece with my husband. We just found out that some mothers were being held there in a large residential block, who gave birth there and had to stay there until giving birth. And they were also fed very well, and so on. They also received money, and then they had to leave the children and go. And this is also in part happening in Poland, in Turkey. I know this coincidentally from a Polish investigative journalist who did fantastic interviews. I believe you find it online, or it's called In the Eye of the Devil, im Auge des Teufels. Very, very well portrayed. He interviewed child traffickers, and they talked about how the babies, for example, are taken to Turkish baby brothels for men to indulge, especially really aggressive ones who wanted to release their aggressions. Some of them tried to tear off a leg or an arm from the children. Worse stories. And in case the children really survived somewhat, after a few years, they were throwaway children. They had their organs removed. It is so terrible, you know. It's known. I often cooperate, maybe you've seen it at our symposia, with the former State Criminal Police Office President Uwe Kanz, who very often, this is his main topic. This used to be his main theme, child trafficking. He was the LKA president in Thuringia and is now retired. But he also conducted a study commissioned by the European Union a few years ago. He said, here are the problems and something should happen now. And he says nothing has happened, despite my study. The number continued rising. Intervention is unwanted. It is politically unwanted. Now, fact is that there has been this major public case in Austria where a mother had the twins removed right after birth and also the 3-year-old child, and they were then distributed to homosexual couples. One also hears about these rainbow initiatives, that there's a shortage of children, so there are more and more families that are rainbow families who want to adopt children. Then there are children available, and especially babies are therefore sought after. Has this demand for babies also something to do with the fact that in 2016 or 2017, depending on the country, Austria or Germany, the adoption of children by homosexuals was made legal? That definitely has something to do with it. And specifically, so-called rainbow families are mostly very powerful, are often in very high positions. They also get things done faster than homosexuals who are employed at Aldi or whatever. That's common knowledge. That's what it's like. And we also know this from Comma 13. They say this very openly. Professor Dr. Ulrich Kutschere had a longer telephone call with Dieter Gieseking. He reported about it at our symposium. They say they just love the children. Yes, they are only doing good for them, so everything fine. And the Greens promote that a lot. The SPD, the Social Democrats, support that a lot. It was for a reason that Olaf Scholz said in 2002, we want the air supremacy over the cribs. That was the goal, and they have achieved that. Meanwhile, they have even air supremacy over families, because families from whom the children have been taken away are practically exposed at the mercy of the state. Their money is being taken away, their existence is destroyed. Many who resist are being psychiatrically institutionalized, end up in psychiatric hospitals, often in closed hospitals. For one individual, it's impossible to help everyone. I have to turn many down, so many emergency calls. When Action Resist was founded last February, we on a daily basis had at least 500 emails from desperate parents. We were no longer able to manage all that. We worked on it with 6 people, and we were not able to cope with all of this, because this is also an incredibly extensive field. You cannot just give a short piece of advice. That's simply not possible. But you switched from the rainbow families to a general topic. Now, I wanted to ask, because you said that they seem very powerful, or they have such a big lobby, and the leading positions or politics are so interested in it. How can you explain this? Why is this so? I don't know. Good question. This has already been handed down by the WHO. This is indeed part of the WHO program, supposed to be promoted. Children who already, I don't know how old, 10 or 12 years old, should have the opportunity to undergo operation to change their sex, being able to take hormones. This is crazy. In my opinion, children's identity should be taken away from at an early age. They should have no longer any bonds. That explains. It started slowly. So when children were removed, parents were first told, for the first 6 weeks you won't have any contact. They have to arrive there first. That's where it started. Then the children were told, your parents don't want to see you. This is how it continued. They couldn't call because they didn't even know where the children were. So this means the children were already being told that their parents were not interested in them anymore. So they attempt to break the bond. And this is happening more and more. People are deprived of their roots. One takes away one parent, then both parents are taken away, and now the gender is taken away. This is very exciting because on the one hand, it's always being said, especially when it's about emancipation, the father is so important for the family, he must be at home, spend more time, child needs father and mother to develop well, and then when a rainbow family comes, suddenly this is no longer needed. That's interesting. This is not an endangerment of risk to the child's welfare when there is no longer a mother or father. This is interesting, this line of argumentation. Yeah, true, exactly. Well, we have many single parents, but that shouldn't be the case either. Single parenting is a completely wrong term. These are separately parenting people because all of these children have both a mother and a father, except for the case that one has died. Then they have a single parent. But typically, one part is separately parenting. And the bad thing is when one parent is just separated this way, who's useless or something, that's bad for children too. This is horrible. This is a trauma. But the trauma can be increased. It can be boosted by simply taking both parents away, by losing all type of protection, by being not allowed to lock their doors in children's homes. Anyone can just come in anytime. There are no keys. They have no privacy. They are touched by other children. They are sexually abused by other children. I have many cases. They are partially abused by carers. And in the scandal of Korntal, this Catholic community, Korntal, in that case, children were sold to rich or of middle-class families to do household chores there, and then were raped by the gentlemen. They were handed over to American soldiers, and I've spoken to a lady who was in such a children's home. She told me that, and it's going on for a while, and not only until the 70s or 80s. It's still the case. To me, it all sounds like organized destruction of humans, of nations. It's hard to imagine. It is truly sustainable. The families, the children are destroyed for a lifetime. I can't even come close to imagining how this feels. It's really intense. I also feel a bit nauseous now, I must admit. Let's maybe try to find a positive ending now, if this is at all possible. Can you protect yourself against it? Can you do anything about it? Yes, you can. If the Youth Welfare Office is knocking on the door, immediately go to a lawyer, have a so-called Schutzschrift, a protective letter prepared that is sent to the relevant court. With a protective letter, the youth welfare offices may not remove the children anymore without prior oral hearings. This is then no longer possible. And do you have to allow them in the house? No, you don't have to. In case of imminent danger, the police may come along and watch and simply break in. This is possible. But if you already have the suspicion, usually there's always a warning beforehand. Immediately get a protective letter. What parents should always do, preferably even before the child is born, make a will, which you would usually do anyway. What happens if I should have an accident, in coma, or no longer live? Who would take care of my child? and several people who are very well qualified, who are in a good position, who have enough space for a child, who have a good reputation, they should be put on the list and saying, this person is to become the guardian for my child. The Youth Welfare Office then has the duty, and the court as well, to check each individual on the list. And the more you have on the list, the better, because then they don't really feel like it doing that anymore. So before they leave, before they remove the, you first have to contact all of these people, right? Exactly. And this last will, must be registered at the register court. That is important. Then you have a registration number, and this provides the protection. That's the important thing. Many talk about the so-called parental will and do not explain the parents that this also has to be registered, because otherwise the protection does not exist at all. But with this protection, the local court knows when the Youth Welfare Office arrives and says, we have a decision without oral hearing, the child cannot be removed. The judge is always obliged to inquire with the register court beforehand, and if there's a will, then this cannot happen like this. Well, thank you very much. These tips are really worth gold. But this is the situation for Germany now. For Austria, you can probably say a little about this. But dear Auf1 viewers, we will certainly investigate this matter further and consult an expert on how to best protect yourself in Austria. We heard it once again today. Our children urgently need our protection. Let's not look the other way. Let's not remain silent. Let's look after our children and support them, those who raise their voice against injustice. And with that, I bid you farewell, dear viewers. Until next time with Elsa on Auf1.